Thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video.
You know, when the Z Flip 3 first came out, I was a little confused. It kind of seemed like a phone in search of a purpose. Like, it folds in half, but besides that, like, it's basically just a regular phone. But the more I thought about it, the more I think this actually answers a question or solves a problem that I have, or I'm at least looking for a solution for. For a few years now, I've been looking for a phone that stays out of the way, lets me use it when I need to, but I am not constantly on. I think that's a problem a lot of us have these days. We're always on our phone. We're a little addicted if we're being honest with ourselves. And having a phone that still does everything you need it to do, but is not distracting and just kind of gets out of the way is important. Now, to solve that, before I actually went with this, the iPhone 12 mini, which I think before the Z Flip was the best option of giving you a great phone that does everything you need it to do, but is also, you know, it's small, it's compact, you don't have to think about it, it just works. But the more I think about it, the more I'm starting to think that the Z Flip 3 might be the perfect phone for this. But that leaves the question. If you're looking for a phone that just kind of stays out of the way, does what you need it to do, which one of these should you get?
I think there's really three things that stand out about both these phones. It's the hardware, you know, the design, the screen, all that, the camera system, and then all the touted features, like what Samsung and Apple want you to think about with these phones. When you pick up the Z Flip for the first time, it's just plain fun. If you've never used one before, I'm telling you, once you do, you're gonna be opening and closing it as many times as you can. Not only because you kind of have to if you want to use the phone, but it's also just fun. It's a novelty at this point. It's still relatively new, and it's just cool tech. Keeping the mission in mind, the design and the hardware of the Z Flip 3 stays out of the way better than any phone or any smartphone that I've ever used. Not only is this phone compact and easy to carry, whether it's in your pockets or it's in a bag, like you're not gonna notice it there really at all, which is great, but you have to deliberately open it to use it. So that just by its nature means that it's gonna be much more of a tool that you have to choose to use rather than one that you instinctively are just always on. That's a big deal. That's not really that much different than the Flip that came before this, but there are a lot of changes that Samsung made that I think make this just the best version of what this phone could be, at least from the tech that we can possibly have in 2021. The outside, I think, is much better made. I have the black version here. No longer the glossy black, so it's not a fingerprint magnet like it was before. It just looks a lot more sleek, a lot more elegant. I still really am only getting, you know, Nintendo SP vibes, but hey, it works. It's a form factor that I think works well for a folding phone. And I really like that when you open up the phone, you're getting a full screen experience. So when you do choose to use it, or when you do need to use it, you're not being hindered in any way. It is a full smartphone device. Yes, the aspect ratio is it's a little weird. So if you're watching a video in full screen or something like that, it's not quite what you would expect on like an S21, but more or less, you're getting a big screen that works really well. But I did notice that the material of the display does feel a little higher quality. This year it actually feels like glass rather than plastic pretending to be glass. And speaking of, the display I think is much higher quality. The way I would explain this is it's a Samsung screen, it just happens to fold. It now has 120 Hertz, so you get that really smooth look. It does feel brighter and more vibrant. It's just an overall better screen. So if you've seen an S21 or an S20 or anything before it, the screen very much looks the same as any Samsung screen they've made before. Again, it just happens to fold. What's nice though is that cover screen. Now it is actually usable, so while it is in your pocket, say you get a notification and you pull it out, you don't have to open it. So again, you're staying less distracted, you're being less engaged with the phone. You can just check it, put it away. You're not tempted to open up an app because you can't. It just shows you some information here. And the screen is also much improved, which I like. I like that you can add your own wallpaper, you can customize how it looks, the format, and you can actually do more stuff on it. It's not only see notifications and the time, which was pretty much all the screen was useful for before. You can set your timer, you got your alarm. There's a bunch of different widgets that you can add here that make that front screen useful, but still less distracting. Again, keeping the mission in mind. The iPhone, on the other hand, is very much just an iPhone. It just happens to be smaller, and that is what makes it less distracting. Maybe you want to use it less because, at least in my experience, when I use this phone, there is a little bit of a cramped feeling. When I'm using different apps, I do find myself needing to pay a little bit more attention because the screen is smaller, and in turn, at least I've found that I don't use it as much because of that. It's like an annoyance that I actually like, if that makes any sense. The phone is smaller, but you're still getting an iPhone. And I'm really glad that Apple made the iPhone 12 mini and that they're gonna continue that with the iPhone 13 mini. Seems like that's not gonna go any farther than that. So that's kind of a bummer, but the fact that this phone exists, I'm really happy about. But when it comes to form factor, there's no doubt that the Z Flip 3 has it nailed down. If you wanna not be distracted by your phone, that's the best solution. Real quick before I continue, I want to thank this video's sponsor, Skillshare. Now, Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes for really anything in the creative field. So if you want to learn videography, photography, illustration, design, I mean, really anything you can think of in that creative field, Skillshare has a class for you. And what's great is that they have classes for really any skill level that you're at. So whether or not you want to try something new and just dabble in it, see if it's something you like, or if you're an expert and you just want to learn from someone new, see if there's things you haven't heard, well, Skillshare offers classes for any of those categories. Now, one of the classes I've been really liking lately is from Jessica Kobasi. It's about portrait photography. I've talked about it a few times here, but I've been trying to get better at my portrait photography work, and having a class like this from someone who really knows what they're doing is very helpful. So if this sounds like something you'd like to try out, which you definitely should, check out the link down in the description. The first 1,000 of you to hit that link will get a free 1-month trial of Skillshare Premium, so you can try everything and get learning.
When it comes to cameras, both of these phones are extremely similar, and when it comes down to it, it's much more of a personal preference thing. Both phones are going to take great photos, and both phones' hardware is almost identical. So with the Z Flip 3, you get two cameras, both are 12 megapixel, it's a wide and an ultra wide, and that's the same thing that you get on the iPhone 12 mini. Now, for me personally, the iPhone 12 mini is something that I prefer. Samsung's photos to me just always seem a bit digital, a bit processed, especially when it comes to skin tones. It's just not something I prefer. Is it bad? No, it's just a personal preference thing. Whereas with the iPhone, I like the way it does its processing. I feel like it's much more natural. It feels more like a photograph rather than a camera phone photo. Again, personal preference thing. But I've used the iPhone camera for many situations, and really what I come away with is it's a camera that you can rely on. It's going to give you a predictable photo almost every single time, and really in any situation. So that includes at night, during the day, and all those in between times. You're gonna get some sort of usable photo out of the iPhone every single time. Not to mention the video side of things. I make videos for a living, so having a camera that does excellent at video is important to me. And as much as most phones have progressed over the years, there's really nothing better than the iPhone when it comes to actually creating videos with it. So the iPhone 12 mini for me is the camera that I prefer. And the fact that you get that good of a camera in such a small phone, I think is a really good benefit. Now, it's not to take away from the Z Flip, because the Flip 3 has excellent cameras as well. Again, it's just a processing difference. Samsung cameras have a very distinct look, and you're getting that here as well. Now, is it going to be the same as what you get on like the S21 Ultra? No, of course not. You're not getting zoom, you're not getting space zoom. It's basically a really solid wide and ultra wide camera. But on the processing side, Samsung does a great job with HDR, bringing out details. For me personally, it's a little bit over sharpened, a little bit too processed, whereas I feel like the iPhone does a better job. But the Z Flip does have a few tricks up its sleeve. That front cover, which I talked about, is now drastically improved. And although you could take pictures before, it was kind of useless. Now with this bigger screen, it's actually usable. It's not the main way I'm going to take pictures, but it does work. And if I want to take a selfie with me and my wife, for instance, I can easily do that with the front screen, and I'm getting the great quality instead of using the interior camera. Plus, one feature I like is that if I have the phone open and I'm taking a photo, I can actually turn that screen on so the person on the other side can see what is happening with the camera. It's a nice little touch, and it's really only possible if you have a second screen on the other side of the phone. But really, I think that's the biggest benefit with the Z Flip. It's that you're using the main cameras for really anything that you do. Yes, the interior camera exists, but you don't need to use that unless you're doing like a video call or something. Usually, if you want to take a photo, you're going to be using the main cameras, whereas with the iPhone, you're using the main cameras for when you're taking a photo, but if you want to take a photo of yourself, you're using the front-facing camera. So give and take here. I think for just pure processing and the way the photos look, I prefer the iPhone, but when it comes to usability, the Z Flip 3 really has some nice tricks. I mean, really all I'm looking for is that they work and give me a nice image when I need them to. If I was really concerned with having the best camera in my pocket, neither of these phones is what I would pick. I have the 12 Pro Max, or I would choose something like a Pixel or the S21 Ultra, something that really packs a punch when it comes to cameras. But since I'm looking for a phone that doesn't make me worry about my phone, the fact that these cameras are so good in such a small form factor, it's a big deal, and I'm happy with both of these cameras. They both do exactly what I'm wanting them to.
Once you get past the design and build and the camera, these phones are basically the same. You just kind of choose which one you want. Do you want iOS or do you want Samsung's version of Android? Because when it comes to features, you're pretty much getting the same thing on both. Both batteries are not very good. The iPhone 12 mini for me has not been a very good battery life experience. I take it off the charger in the morning and by 4, 5 o'clock, I'm pretty much needing a charge. I did get the MagSafe battery to hopefully alleviate that, but then, you're kind of missing out on the small iPhone form factor because now it's a chunky boy. But yeah, you're not gonna be on this phone all day because you really can't. The battery life is just not very good. Hopefully that does get fixed with the 13 that's coming out. There's supposed to be bigger batteries across the board, so I'm hoping for a better battery, but I did find myself with the 12 mini being more conscious of not using my phone because I needed it to last longer throughout the day, and it just wouldn't if I didn't have a charger nearby. Now, I definitely say the Z Flip has a better battery life, but it's still not very good. After all, this is a relatively small phone, and the battery life is good, but not great. You can get throughout the day, but if you're using it heavily, you're gonna drain it before you go to bed. Although, if you do get in the habits of using the cover screen instead of opening the phone all the time, then the battery life will start to become better because you're obviously not lighting up that huge display. But there's only so much you can do there. Eventually you're gonna have to open up the phone, and when you're actually using it, the battery does drain pretty quickly. So it's pretty much the same on both of these phones. And then the other features are very similar. You get biometrics on both. Do you want Face ID? Do you want Touch ID? Both work equally well in their respective environments. They both have 5G, which in my area, I do have 5G coverage, but it's not really any better than LTE at this point at least. So until ultra wideband is really everywhere, 5G is what it is, but it works well on both. Both have NFC for payments, both have dual speakers in the same spots. I mean, when you break them down, aside from the design and the camera, these phones are extremely similar. But taking all of that into account, when it comes to the phone that stays out of the way the best, not necessarily the one that does everything the best, but the one that accomplishes the mission that I set for it, the Z Flip 3 does it the best out of any phone I've ever used. After the first few days when the novelty wears off of the folding phone and you just start to use it as your normal phone, that's when I think this really shines. No longer does this feel like an experiment that Samsung tried once. This feels like a finished phone that does everything you need it to, but it also stays out of the way and you aren't always tempted to be on it because of its folding nature. And I think that's kind of how you have to think of these phones, because when you get past the folding parts, there's nothing really unique about them. The only thing is that they fold and they get kind of small. But besides that, you're using it the same as you would really any other phone. For a long time, I had a hard time justifying it because it really was just a normal phone that folds in half. But when you think of it as a phone that stays out of the way, that's when I think this thing really shines. It does everything you need it to do, but you're not wasting your time on it, and this does that the best.